It's
and
on.
welcome to
Can you see me now?
hashtag One with You, the
And turn it on.
PLDT Enterprise Visual Industry Forum for the Academe industry. This is Corinne Fang Zablan from PLDT Enterprise, and it is my honor to be your host for this afternoon. To all those who just tuned in, we truly appreciate you taking the time to be with us in this session. This pandemic has a growing impact to the global economy and continues to disrupt industries, people's way of life, family, and community. This afternoon, our focus is on education, how it is being disrupted, coping and responding during this unprecedented time. We will get to hear key information from Global Data and PLDT Enterprise on how this pandemic is reshaping global economy and how technology can be harnessed to enable learners and educators to continue to operate. In addition to this, we are fortunate to have with us today a roster of distinguished panelists representing the academic industry to discuss key learnings and experiences, as well as share best practices on how educational institutions are responding and planning for the new era of education. If you have any questions and suggestions, feel free to key them in through the chat box located on your right side of the screen. Before we begin, here's a quick rundown of our reminders. For uninterrupted viewing experience, make sure you have a stable internet connection. Feel free to use any of the devices to view the virtual event. And for better appreciation, turn up the volume or use your headphones. And now, to officially start the program, our first presenter is a highly respected financial analyst based in Sydney, Australia, whose focus is to study areas including retail banking and wealth management market in the Asia-Pacific region. He leads a team that focuses on identifying desirable customer segments, growth niches, and the mass affluent and trends affecting the retail banking space in Asia-Pacific. He has been involved in large-scale benchmarking projects, and some of his recent topics of research includes a close look at the wealth management market in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. Here to share the latest data on the impact of coronavirus on the global economic landscape with focus on Asia-Pacific region to help local industries thrive amid this crisis. Please let us all welcome on screen Global Data's Head of Content for Asia-Pacific, Mr. Andrew Haslip.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for the great introduction. Yes, I'll be covering off some of the global trends that have been impacted by the virus. So I think we'll skip right into it onto the first slide. So obviously here we have, this is already out of date. This is the slide prepared late last week, but it just shows really that the infection rates are still increasing exponentially around the world. Global Data's own epidemiologists forecast in the best case scenario that this time next week we have 10 million cases around the world to deal with. So obviously there's been a lot of impact in terms of the global economy, and we'll be exploring that in the next slide, please. Here we're looking at just a few of the case counts from the top 10 countries in terms of the virus's impact on the right there. So you see the United States leading the way with Spain and Italy close behind. All of those countries have actually exceeded China's case total by the time it had finished its first phase of the virus. So that's the kind of, I guess, the leaders in terms of the overall trend in the world. And on the left here, we see the cumulative confirmed case totals for major Asia-Pacific economies, and below that, the rolling 7-day average of new confirmed cases. So as you can see, there's still an increase in terms of case totals around the region, but there's some good trends in terms of average new case totals coming in particular, if we all want to be Hong Kong in this regard, but also Australia tracking quite nicely as well. And you can see just in the middle there, there's the Philippines itself tracking more or less the South Korean experience, which is, to be honest, one of the better experiences that we could be having. So kicking on to the next slide. Here, I guess one of the interesting issues that's very important for how fast economies can actually revive themselves again is their rate of testing. So here we have the total number of tests performed in the purple, and in the pink, a total tests performed per million. And once again, in terms of how we look at things at Global Data, we really do use South Korea as a bit of a benchmark in terms of how to get on top of it. And you can see there's a number of markets around Asia Pacific that have actually exceeded those tests per million metrics that South Korea has. So that's quite encouraging. Unfortunately, you can also see there's quite a few that are lagging there, and so that's probably a greater source of worry in the longer term about how fast the region can actually bounce back in terms of the opening of economies again. So I think if we click on to the next slide here, here of course deaths soar. Once again, a bit of a grim slide, really, but there's a couple of big trends here. What we're seeing really is the shift to the center of gravity of the virus from Asia Pacific originally, then to Europe, and obviously now to the United States in terms of their ongoing crisis there. So clicking on to the sixth slide. Excellent. There are some hopes for the future. These are the trials and studies that Global Data itself is tracking quite closely, and this very much informs of us when we think we can actually get back to normal after the crisis, but also after the kind of holding pattern that we need to adopt before effective therapeutics and vaccines can be rolled out in a mass way. And this very much informs us when we think there's going to be a return to normalcy. Unfortunately, that still is a number of months away, to a return to true normalcy. But there are some glimmers of hope out there. The amount of drug trials that we're monitoring in a lot of the key countries, United States, Iran, France, being just the top ones, growing exponentially week on week, which is great. Obviously, a lot of those won't pan out, but it's what needs to happen for the actual vaccines to come into play. So very encouraging there. Unfortunately, already some data coming out of the pipeline, as we know from over the weekend. So just kicking on to slide number 7 now. The overall picture that we're kind of presented with on slide 7 is just the impact here of the world economies. So we're looking here at the leading economies around the world on slide 7. So just kick over to the next slide. And this really is a kind of a look at the number of confirmed cases per million, and also the expected growth in terms of the unemployment and GDP, obviously not being great. So one of the key things we see here is basically the leading indicators of the markets. So the oil prices being the most dramatic one to collapse over in recent years. So there was a surge. Obviously, we know that the oil price also went negative in recent days. Obviously, a sign of a cratering demand and significant economic contraction around the world for the next couple of months, because it's usually a leading indicator of economic activity, in particular with the oil price. So that's a key one that we monitor very closely. Kicking on to the next slide. it really has resulted in consensus around the world of a global recession, with the IMF itself expecting the world economy to contract by roughly 3% in 2020, as the great lockdown, that they're calling it, will cause a dramatic drop in economic activity, centered on Q2 for most markets, but obviously March. Being the first year of real first month of real impact, but the truly horrific numbers, unfortunately, in terms of the GDP, are going to be the Q2 figures once they come out. Obviously, GDP is a bit of a lagging indicator, so it's hard to actually get a real good feel as to where that's coming. And a lot of what we're doing right now is trying to model out how big the fall will be for Q2. Fortunately, a lot of upside expected towards the end of the year, when economies do actually start coming out of lockdown, and assuming that there's no big second wave once the northern hemisphere's winter starts hitting in November. So really, I guess the main points here: almost every country employment figures, very grim reading. There's about 6.7% of employment worldwide wiped out by the virus. So that's obviously going to have a major impact, particularly in those regions and in those markets where there hasn't been as big a ability for the government to intervene and support jobs in the economy. And finally, kicking over to slide 10, concerns over the spread of COVID-19 do actually remain quite high. Global Data does a tracking survey of a lot of the businesses we actually just deal with, as well as a lot of our readers of our industry magazines. So one of the things we're obviously asking about on our sites and in polls to our clients is what are your prospects for, and what is your view on your company's future, and due to the impact of the virus. And as you can see down on the left, there was a growing view of optimism towards the middle of the month. So around the 10th to roughly the 17th of April, there was a growing degree of optimism, as it was felt by the business community that governments around the world were actually getting to grips with what was happening with the crisis. And so that really, I think, solidified a more greater optimism, and might have resulted in a little bit of complacency on what the actual economic impact is, because very much since that time, there's been a dimming of optimism amongst the business community. A lot of that really is down to the fact that they're now looking forward to what happens after the crisis. So yes, the governments around the world have put a great deal of cash and resource behind the support programs to keep their economies ticking over while they're in lockdown. But what happens after? Because essentially, that is just a stabilization program, only meant to keep things from going truly pear-shaped. We're still going to result, under all best case scenarios, with a deep recession afterwards. And so how does the business community, how does the world recover from that? That's very big questions that the leaders that we're surveying are beginning to deal with now. And I think that's what really needs to be dominating strategic conversations in every sector, including the education sector, obviously, going forward, is how do we deal with the 6 to 12 months of recession that we're expecting around the world, centered in particular on major economies like the US, like the UK, and the rest of Europe. How do we come to terms with that prospect? And on the right there, of course, is how concerned, obviously, our respondents are with COVID-19. Obviously, that's been high and stable. I mean, a little erratic, but quite stable, above 70% for most of the duration of the crisis, and really do expect that to continue. Now, just looking at the final slide there, some of course, we ask a lot of questions about business leaders, but if you actually look and talk to consumers around Asia Pacific, which we're also doing in a tracking poll. So we began this tracking poll late March, and we'll be ending it in late May, basically trying to gauge consumer sentiment over the lockdown period, when most economies are going into lockdown. We do find there is a bit more uh, pessimism in the market when it comes to the impact of the virus in Asia Pacific compared to the rest of the world. So not a massive gap, but a 5 to 6% gap there, which is quite interesting. So the one thing we do want to stress, though, is that there is a growing sense of optimism as well. So from late March to early April, there has been a slight uptick in terms of of the optimism, looking forward and expecting how much better it will develop over the next little while. So that is moderately optimistic, I guess, is the term we'd use for that. So for the summary of the global impact of COVID-19, so essentially major stock markets are definitely expected to remain volatile over the next little while. Oil prices have collapsed, and that's something we're not seeing as likely to recover anytime soon, which is actually, when we get right down to it, for oil importing markets like most of the world, a net stimulus, although that's obviously not necessarily enough to get us out of recession. Lots of economists have already cut their GDP forecasts. Almost all developed markets in the world are expected to suffer recession going forward. And that's roughly about a decline of 2.3% for the entire globe. But I just want to stress that a lot of developing markets are still expected to eke out some growth in 2020, and that 2.3% actually hides a multitude of sins. For example, if you look at New Zealand, their response to the crisis has been quite aggressive, and actually held up as a gold standard. But even under the best case scenario, they're expecting a 13% contraction by their treasury in the actual economy over 2020, and that's just highlighting how dramatic it can be. Considering that we didn't see numbers anywhere near that close in the last financial crisis, for instance. So definitely a recession. There's a major weakness centered on the major economies of the world, so in particular the US, UK, and the rest of Europe. But even if you look at what's happening in China and the possibility of a second wave for the Chinese market, that's not a great boost either. So generally speaking, quite a negative economic outlook for the world, unfortunately. And basically that is the context all industry is facing, including the academic sector, over the next year to 18 months for sure. So coping with rock bottom interest rates, government support in a big way, yes, that's good, but also unfortunately soaring unemployment, hiring on hold, and more layoffs expected over the next 2 to 3 months in particular. So that's our general forecast for the global economy. So on almost all measures, a negative story, but hopefully one in which we'll be able to come out the other end a little bit wiser and better able to cope.
Thank you, Andrew. Quite a grim. You're right. You put it on point. Quite a grim outlook. And education is, just like the many industries that are grappling, no, with this pandemic. This session is actually really to maybe gain insights, at least for the local Philippine setting, how Academe is managing and mitigating that risk. But I like it that there's a little bit of bright side, at least a little bit of silver lining for Asia Pacific, particularly New Zealand. And I think primarily on the cultural side, that Asians are maybe a little bit more positive looking. Okay, and we see that there's going to be an end and a resolution soon. Our second speaker has over 20 years of customer relationship management experience in telecoms, having headed Smart Wireless and headed the PLDT regional sales teams for over 20 years. Today, he is PLDT's industry head for Academe, FMCG, Logistics, Pharma, and Embassy. To share with us some insights on the Academe industry with special focus on technology solutions that they can leverage on, please welcome Corporate Relationship Management Head of PLDT Enterprise, Mr. Dick Perez.
Thank you, Corinne, for the wonderful introduction. We are very honored for the opportunity given to PLDT, SMART, and DPLDT to help the Academe during this pandemic crisis. Truly, this crisis creates an unimaginable negative impact globally and especially to the Philippines. The education sector is one of the worst affected by this pandemic that disrupted the learning and well-being of our students. Our main objective is to make online learning more accessible to every Filipino nationwide. Together, we can learn as one. But before we can learn as one, let us understand our current situation and the impact that it creates to everyone. According to UNESCO, there's close to 1.2 million teachers and 32 million students that are affected by the COVID-19 lockdown. All of them will need access to online learning. The information and content will have to be accessed by every student at their homes and will be facilitated by their teachers in their homes as well. Looking at the Philippine education, the effect of the pandemic will definitely be pronounced on the financials of the schools, as their capacity to generate income will be heavily challenged. The school calendar was likewise disrupted with DepEd's announcement postponing the opening of classes. The initiative to embrace e-learning as an immediate solution to midterm solution is the right approach. PLDT Group is one of the academies. It's one with the Academe on this. For starters, we have increased the bandwidth to all subscribers, given the projected increase in demand and usage of internet. To our COVID-19 frontliners, hospitals, and testing centers, we have provided smart Wi-Fi to ensure that everyone in these sites has access to the internet. Likewise, we have partnered with DepEd and provided free access to the DepEd Commons. This is made available to all Smart, TNT, and Sun subscribers. We listened to our dedicated and hardworking school administrators, and most of them are caught by surprise. The big question that they need to ask themselves is, are we ready? But the only answer that we keep on hearing is the honest admittance that no, we are not. We are not ready. I'm sure most of you have some sort of business continuity and disaster preparedness measures and solutions. But no one has anticipated a catastrophe as big as COVID-19. To be able to provide better and right solutions, we need to understand the impact in every facet of the school system. COVID-19 impacts every aspect of the educational organization. On teaching and learning, most students will complete the current semester online, or for some, mass promotion and auto passing. The class of 2020 will graduate online without a formal ceremony. This will be remembered in history as the first mass online graduation. On student enrollment, equity, and experience, institutions with limited or no online learning experience will be affected if their students are dissatisfied with their online learning offerings and might decide to go elsewhere. In terms of equity, lower income students will disproportionately suffer due to the absence or lack of resources. On faculty and staff, the big shift to online learning is already stretching resources, including workforce. The faculty with little or no experience in teaching in this environment may struggle and will be on a disadvantage. On infrastructure, the sudden shift to online learning is already stretching existing infrastructure. IT infrastructure will need upgrading, including the integration of new learning software and tools to maintain teaching standards as courses move online. The impact on finances, since a lot of jobs are at stake and companies will have to downsize. Retrenched parents will have to tighten their belts. Option is to enroll their children to more affordable schools, or worse, their children's education will take a backseat. So what can schools do to soften the impact? On the near term or transition to normalcy, they will need to focus on the students and faculty's overall well-being and experience. Schools then need to stabilize the education system that are in place. Creative ways on improving current program must be done at the least possible cost. The winner will be the school who can deliver a superior educational content with reduced or maintained tuition fees. Medium term, or what we will probably call the new norm, focus on enrollment, financial, and operations. Schools will need to provide online payment solutions to keep the revenue and cash flow healthy to sustain the school operations. For the long term, there should be focus on continuous improvement. Schools must re-engineer their entire process using technology as a means to automate and simplify current processes. From enrollment to delivering the final grade, it must be done online. It must be available with very little physical interface required from the parents and students. Here is a snapshot of how the other countries are responding to the crisis. Some countries like China, Italy, France, Germany, and Saudi Arabia went full online, while there are some like Lebanon who simply send their children home with lessons as homework. There are those who utilize television as a vehicle to deliver educational content. There are countries where telecommunication companies, with assistance from the government, provided free access to selected websites and educational content. On the other hand, countries like USA, Portugal, Morocco, Colombia, and Turkey simply provide the discounted rates if accessing educational websites. A more interesting approach was done by Nicaragua, where they also combined radio broadcasts with active learning to deliver the learning content. Providing solutions for e-learning cannot be achieved by one entity or group. It is a collective effort coming from the government, private sector, NGOs, and other concerned groups. We in PLDT, realizing that need, created an educational ecosystem. Within the PLDT group, we have organized all the companies to focus on one thing, and that is delivering an efficient and reliable educational content to the students. This will be done in coordination with government entities such as Department of Education, Department of Social Welfare and Development, TESDA, and others. Critical to the ecosystem are the relevant organizations like Catholic Education Association of the Philippines, Philippine E-Learning Society, Philippine Association of Colleges and Universities, and other related organizations. Likewise, We will need the support of technology partners like Microsoft, Google, and Cisco, among others. We will need their support and to encourage more providers of learning management system, such as Canvas, Blackboard, Neo, LMS, and the like, to help us in nation building. All these have critical roles to play if we are serious in making e-learning a success in our country. At this point, please allow me to highlight key areas that PLDT could be of help through our iLearn with PLDT solutions. From access to online learning through our wireless and fixed broadband connection, Wi-Fi and centralized school, subsidized load facility for your teachers and student scholars, to improving collaboration using our partnership with Microsoft and Google. Further, we can help by providing a platform for your e-campus, LMS, and content to securely reach more students and faculty, and making operation more efficiently, especially at this most difficult time through our ERP, digitalization technology, and our student and faculty managed help desk. To keep your information protected using our state-of-the-art in-country cloud services that makes information closer to your home, and not only closer, but delivering it straight to your home. We have the right facility to bring information directly to your homes. Critical to this is confining the data and services inside the Philippines. As of now, most of the LMS providers are hosted outside the country, and this greatly constrain and impact the international data traffic. We employ the help of the school administrators, faculty, and even students to encourage LMS and educational content providers to relocate here in the Philippines. Doing this will practically improve the speed in accessing the learning management system. Doing this will promote a better student and faculty experience in working with the LMS. This we will do to fulfill our promise to the Academe to provide our students with the best e-learning content and experience. This we will do to make a positive impact in educating the Filipinos. This is our commitment, and we hope that it is also yours. Because in PLDT, we are committed to keep you connected. Our frontliners, even at the midst of COVID-19, are working hard day and night, dedicated to keep you connected whenever, wherever. We are one with the Filipino people against COVID-19. As our chairman, MVP, always say, the good on this is that the digital revolution is not only about technology, but it is ultimately human. Let's make quality education more inclusive and accessible for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Beautiful said. To recap, technology is an integral part of the online learning management system, both as a content and delivery platform, as well as an end user and enabler. PLDT, together with its various affiliates and partners, are in the front and center of the education ecosystem, enabling institutions and learners transform into a new era of learning. Again, thank you for all our keynote speakers. Those were very, very good insights. And now we move on to the next part of the program. At this point, we would like to introduce our esteemed roster of panelists who are also live with us and will be joining in today's insight sharing. First up, we'd like to introduce President and Chancellor of De La Salle Lipa, Brother Dante Jose R. Amisola. Brother, your insights from the presenters. Brother, maybe I think the mic is off. Can you? Yeah. You're okay.
Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry. Thank
Yes.
you. Hello. Hello, Corinne. Hello, everybody. Thank you to the first two presenters, Dick and Andrew. I I agree. There's such a great uh, what do you call this? Worry about what's happening now, and I think the impact is very clear in terms of economics worldwide. Actually, some people are saying that the estimates right now may not even approximate what would really be the impact in terms of economics. But in education, recently the Cocopea estimated that this COVID-19 crisis would probably impact up to 2 billion the private schools alone, and I think this is a really serious effect. But more than that, I think in terms of learning, there's a lot of students. There are a lot of students who have really missed school, um, except for a very few that have continued with their online program. In De La Salipa, for example, we have not really stopped teaching since March. Even before March 15, we've gone online. We were just one of those lucky schools, probably because we have prepared even way before this. We have had our infrastructure done. We've put in like 13 kilometers of fiber optic network about 3 years ago, and all our classrooms. And yet, I think the problem, even with schools like us who have kind of prepared for online learning, is that now the problem is at home. About 30% of our faculty are unable to access the internet very well. And that includes also about maybe 40% of our students. And that's really, really troubling because there is a lack of continuity in learning. And at the same time, I think the problem of access to those who do not have access. And this is where we were trying to partner really with the PLDT Smart, knowing about this problem of access to the internet at home. We're trying to work some solutions with PLDT Smart so that all of these students and faculty and staff that are currently on work from home and online learning mode from home could really fully utilize what we have had placed in the last 3 years. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. Next, we have with us the Executive Director of Catholic Educational Association of the Philippines, SEAP, Mr. Alan Arellano. Alan, your thoughts. Alan, please turn on your
Okay,
mic.
thank you for inviting CAP and thank you for having me this afternoon. Um, the CAP is an organization of 1,525 institutions. No, we belong to the universe of 62,000 schools all over the country, and 14,000 of which are private educational institutions. Now, we are severely impacted by this. We have been paying our teachers for the last 2 months, and we are having problems with our collection. Brother is correct. Our Cocopea assessment is that if we push the enrollment to September or later than August, we'll be incurring around 46 billion pesos. And if we push it further back, or if we stop the school year, we may be incurring around 200 billion collectively as a private educational community. So the CAP with Cocopea, and Cocopea is the Coordinating Council for Private Educational Associations. There are 5 associations working to advocate for the private institutions. We've been talking to the government, been requesting the government for assistance to support the private educational community. As a matter of fact, we are closely having meetings with the top educational leaders, the Secretary of the Department of Education, the CHED chair, and all the other, even with the IATF. No, we are so happy that the private educational, the private sector, the business sector are also helping. They've been offering their support, and we were only hoping that the telecommunication industry will be partnering with the educational community to deliver uh, learning a clear learning environment for our students. The impact of the global economic meltdown will affect us even more because most of our students are from a family of OFWs, small and medium enterprise business owners, professionals who may not be able to work because of the enhanced community quarantine and the impact of COVID-19. We are tuition dependent, no? So all our communities are now working to support each other. The CAP is organized into diocesan systems and uh, congregational systems. So each school is helping the other get by. And there's been attempts to organize to clearly express all these things to the government so that the what support is given to everyone is also given to the private educational community. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Very good insight. So staggering the impact of this pandemic to the education system, especially to the school owners. And lastly, for our final reactor, the president of Philippine E-Learning Society and also the director of Educational Technology Center from UST, Professor Sherry Ramos. Share insights. Thank you.
A pleasant good afternoon to everyone. Let me first thank the organizers for the opportunity to engage with you today. COVID-19 pandemic has indeed pushed our economies worse than the global financial crisis, with no countries being spared, bringing all of our activities to a halt. And the pandemic did not just paralyze the global economic landscape with its various industries. It also led to the sudden closure of schools across the country. And not only that, we are also worrying about losing jobs from the service industries. We are also concerned about our frontliners in the classroom, our teachers. And most of them, most of our members as well, are teachers and exercising the power of the use of technology as e-learning professionals at the same time. So with that, our students are as well are adjusting suddenly into what we call a self-directed mode of instruction. And this closure forced most schools to consider online delivery as the next best option to reach students remotely. And while there have been inevitable problems, so the entire learning community has been busier than ever. So learning on what it takes to be successful online by attending webinars, such as what we are having right now, and the webinars that we have been provided through the Philippine E-Learning Society. So PELS as an organization has observed some common global and national trends as we shifted to remote instruction. Surprisingly, number one is that we have seen innovation in teaching practices. The pandemic has, of course, shifted the way we educate people. And educational institutions are suddenly pushed to change, be it positive or negative, but still it led to that surprisingly to innovations. So we must admit that there was that slow pace in digital integration, but the lockdown has become a catalyst for educational worldwide to search for that innovative solution in a relatively short period of time. And that we find online instruction as a viable, if not the best option for teachers to reach their students wherever they are. Second is inspiration from partnerships. So in the series of webinars that PELS has conducted, tech giants come together with their compassion and help teachers utilize the platforms as a temporary solution to the crisis. And this has been welcomed by a lot of teachers, especially from those without digital transformation plans in place before pandemic. The third is inequality in digital access as well as in attitude and confidence level. And whether it is in synchronous or asynchronous, it definitely widened the digital divide. With online delivery come the price, and the quality of learning is heavily dependent as well on the level of digital access and the readiness of your teachers and students. So, in a snap, the pandemic has unleashed this rapid revolution in the way we teach and learn. And institutions are asking the question, how do we transition to a virtual campus? But most importantly, we want to have our students stay on track for the future careers, remain relevant for employability after the lockdown. We don't want to see schools just fell out of the race, be left behind, or worse, land in a fossil record of institutions that did not do anything to make their school disaster proof ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ramos. Thank you all for our very, very good insights. At this point, we'll now officially proceed to our Q&A segment.
Key in your questions, comments, and suggestions via the chat.
To everyone who's just tuned in this afternoon, join us as and be part of the discussion by keying in your questions via the chat feature on your right side of the screen. Okay, for our first question, I think Brother Dante can answer this question. Brother Dante, please.
I hope I can, Miss Corinne. Thank you.
Yes. Brother, during the pandemic outbreak, what challenges have you encountered as an institution and the coping strategies you implemented to solve them? Your question is actually two-pronged.
Okay.
I'd like to also follow up with an industries are saying that we will never go back to a pre-COVID state. For education, what will be the new model of teaching and what will be the challenges in this new mode?
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Corinne. Thank you for the one who asked the question. Maybe I'd like to answer the second point first, where you asked about, what will be the impact. I think even before COVID-19 came about, we've already had been a crisis in education. If you look at the statistics, of our performance compared to nations worldwide, we were like 113 in education out of like 123 countries all over the world. I think the last, just before COVID came, we were 79th, the last in English, and 78th in both math and science in the PISA results. And that was only 79 countries. So I think we were already in a crisis. And I think this has something to do with what has been mentioned before, that we need to look at our curriculum and our regulatory requirements for our schools, because I think it's giving our schools a difficulty in moving forward, with a future-looking and, as mentioned, a future-proof organization and maybe a future-proof education. Having said that, we were one of the few schools probably that have had a very strong infrastructure in terms of online learning in school. And yet we realized that, as I mentioned earlier, we realized that the problem is really access to the internet, especially in our homes. Mentioned a while ago, 30% of our faculty are not able to clearly get on board, work from home, in even online teaching. And about maybe 30% of our students could not also access the internet or had difficulty accessing the internet. So those were some of the things that we really had to cope with, especially even though we thought we were prepared ahead of the others. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. Yes, we've been in talks with your team since the lockdown, and
Yeah.
we've been very busy. And yes, we look forward to further collaborating with you, brother. Our
Thank
next
you.
question is for Professor Cheryl Ramos. How has the crisis impacted teaching practices, and how does technology play a role in delivering instruction remotely? Your question is also two-pronged because we'd also like to take a look at the moving forward on how academic institutions be more prepared beyond COVID, or what we call the day zero. Professor
Okay.
Ramos.
Okay, I'll now be wearing the hat of an e-learning leader from the University of Santo Tomas. So UST has been able to adopt e-learning 18 years ago. So that time, in fact, should be able to prepare the faculty fully well. But then the crisis has definitely forced the change in the learning modality. So remember that the e-learning spectrum is wide. So from your face-to-face to your fully online course. So what's happening today is that you're forcing the faculty to deliver a course in fully online that should have been done about 6 months prior, and now you want it delivered the next day. So that, in fact, is going to be difficult for most teachers without training. What is now good with UST is that it has its training preparation, it has a support unit that prepare the faculty workforce, and as well as it has that infrastructure. And with the help of PLDT, we are actually looking into how we can bypass the public internet so that we can readily access the portal, which is situated in Australia and Singapore. Now for your second question on the part of the teacher, before I proceed to that, so let me just end that first question first, that in the end, technology can amplify good teaching, but great technology cannot replace poor teaching. And so for the going forward type of question, our school administrators must be able to be adaptive and stay relevant, not just because of the crisis, but because you have a technology pervasive world where we are preparing our students to succeed. And therefore, you need to create an action plan with essential elements that must be addressed. For one,
Okay. I think we can't. Yeah. I think your mic. Okay. Chat. Thank you for that. Thank you for that insight. Thank you. Thank you. I think we have a couple of questions later on for you. I'll call. There is a question for Alan. Alan, what is SAYAP as the biggest association of private schools in the country doing to address the educational issues in relation to the pandemic? Are the Catholic schools ready with the flexible learning options? What are your thoughts, Alan? All right, we'll get back to Alan in a short while. We'll go to Dick. I think this is the best, you're the best person to answer this. Given this pandemic, how can technology support the new era of academe in delivering quality education to the learners as we bring the new classroom into the homes? Dick. Dick, I think you're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. As I was saying, on the network side, PLDT and Smart continue to roll out infrastructure while continuously enhancing the existing sites for both fixed and wireless. For 2020 alone, we have budgeted 83 billion for our network rollout and improvements. But even with stable connectivity in your homes, you will still experience issues in accessing the e-learning portal. Well, there are students who are asking why it takes them longer to access the LMS portal when they have strong internet connection at home. They can browse without any problem, stream movies, and do other online stuff with no issue. Well, the answer is, and as I have mentioned in my presentation, most of the LMS providers are hosted outside the Philippines. Imagine, if a student tries to access the e-learning portal, the data will need to go through several hubs or countries before finally reaching the portal. And this process increases latency. So to address this, we need the LMS providers to consider hosting or mirroring their systems to our data center. This way, traffic will be confined domestically, which will drastically reduce latency. Also, we have created an Academe package, which offers affordable and flexible subscription packages for the students and teachers. And this comes with either a fiber or a wireless connectivity. So you just, if just please call on your dedicated relationship managers should you want to, ask more of these packages. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Thank you. I think Alan is already online. We'll go back to Alan Arellano for the question. SEAP being the largest association of private schools in the country, what is SEAP doing to address the ECQ issues? Alan? Okay. Is Alan online? I think he's on mute. Yeah. Alan? All right. I think I will go back again to Alan. You're keeping us in suspense, Alan. Okay. This last question I will direct for Andrew. Andrew, do you think there would be an enduring acceptance of distance learning as a regular part of service delivery in the education sector elsewhere?
Yeah, I do actually think that the acceptance of digital in the education system will obviously grow. A lot of the barrier that we see in other industries to digital delivery and to having digital become a main channel is just unfamiliarity with it. And one of the things that this crisis has forced on a lot of people is they're now experts in Zoom, in Microsoft Teams, in WebEx, in a way they never thought they would be before. So there's just going to be a greater acceptance that that this is a viable channel for the delivery of all sorts of services, including obviously education. And maybe it won't be the same level that we're experiencing right now. Hopefully not. Hopefully there's a little bit more in-person interaction going forward. But it definitely won't be at the same level as that we saw previously. There's definitely going to be a marked change and across all different industries. And Bill Gates himself noted that there's certain activities pre-crisis that we took to be normal. So like a business trip. Are we going to have business trips in the future? Absolutely. Are we going to have as much as we did previously? Absolutely not. So a lot more of that will be taken up by digital options, and that can be definitely relied upon.
All right. I do miss business trips, Andrew. I'm sure you all feel the same way. Now, this is the last question, and I'm going to ask all the panelists to answer. What, hang on, let me just toggle here. For all panelists, and we'll do the rounds from Brother Dante, Professor Ramos, and of course, Alan, Dick, and Andrew. What assistance can be given to students and teachers who have difficulty with online access? Okay. Shall we start with Brother Dante?
Okay. Hello. Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think one of the things now that we're discussing is if this is going to be the new normal, a full online course, then it certainly cannot be a full tuition and fees as prior to this COVID thing. And I think that will really help students access education. In fact, part of our discussion is that if we have 10,000 students right now, could that mean that we could now have 20,000, 30,000 if we go full online at some point? I think these are really times of opportunities, actually, rather than seeing this as a time of difficulty. There are a number of opportunities, and yet schools have to be prepared for that. We cannot continue on relying on the traditional mode of delivery of education. And I think in terms of equity, this will allow students who used to have no access or little access to quality education to actually now be able to pick from among those offering online learning and which of them they'd like to take. And so again, this crisis brings about lots of opportunities for schools, but we need to pivot what we have been doing before to something that is new and adapt to the new normal. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. That's beautiful. Very, very insightful. Pivot. Yes, that's been our battle cry, our mission, really, to transform into digital. And we thank you really for highlighting that. Next, Professor Che Ramos. Che? I think your mic is off, Che. Please turn it on. Okay. What assistance can be given to students and teachers who have difficulty with online access? Che, your mic. All right. I think we'll ask Alan if Alan is ready. Alan?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead, Alan.
The schools have been doing inventory of their own capabilities the last several weeks. I've attended so many Zoom meetings, webinars, and discussions on delivery modes. The schools try to help their teachers by providing them loans to buy computers and to have proper connectivity. Even if we are experiencing great economic problems, we are also thinking of how to make it possible for us to deliver online learning. But online learning is not the only way. No, there's a menu of flexible learning options, both synchronous and asynchronous, because it's going to take a while for us to go back to traditional face-to-face learning. So we might as well get used to how it is being done now. But the schools are there to assist the teachers and the students. We're concerned about the economic impact and the effect of this on the enrollment the next few months. No? Presently, in our dialogue with DepEd, we're requesting that if it's possible for us to open earlier than the public school, it will help us a lot to reassess our situation and respond accordingly.
Thank you, Alan. Next, Andrew. What assistance can be given to students and teachers who have difficulty with online access? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it is something we've seen in some other industries as well. I guess we just have to understand that just because a consumer is using a digital channel, that doesn't necessarily mean they're digital natives. So you need to make sure that you're still supporting and troubleshooting and providing tutorial and learning via other non-digital means. And also think about digital channels that might be more familiar to these maybe non-digital natives, such as mobile, social media, all the more common platforms that might be used in private life, and just see how help can be given to these questioning kind of digital users, and assistance through that way, so that they can still access and make use of the digital channel in the best way possible.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you to all our panelists. I think we are about to, our last few minutes already is I'd like to thank everyone who tuned in on behalf of PLDT Enterprise, our esteemed presenters and panelists who share their experience, expertise, and time with us. And to all our viewers who are tuned in, thank you for joining us this afternoon. I hope you all gained relevant insights into the effects and solutions the academic sector may undertake to navigate through this pandemic. This has been hashtag One With You, the PLDT Enterprise Industry Forum for the Academe, and this has been Corinne Fang Zablan, your host for this afternoon. Good afternoon. Stay safe.
Thank you, Corinne.
Thank you.